the Heritage oil spill. Reports coming from Heritage is that they have it under control and so on, but yet still we saw in the news last night that residents have been complaining about the fumes. They have been complaining about the pollution going in small streams and polluting their ground provisions and so on. What exactly is the situation on the ground, and is Heritage um, trying to cover up the real situation from coming out to the nation?
So when the event happened first, sometime around the 12th to the 13th, I reached out to Heritage and asked them for information in terms of providing whatever information on a day-to-day basis as to what was the situation. Now, I got no response, and it was only after the carnival then a few of the persons in the village councils they reached out to me and said that there were certain things that were affecting them, and they needed to get Heritage to sit down. So I again reached out to Heritage, and I arranged to have the entire team down there with the village councils, with a few members of the community to kind of rationalize what was happening. The situation is that this oil spill happened on a line that is about 2 to 3 kilometers in the forested areas. So it is not very close to where the houses are. Now, I had asked Heritage exactly what was the total amount or the estimated amount of oil in terms of barrels that was leaked. Up to now, they couldn't say. And my argument was that if we know how much oil was leaked, that will give an indication of what the mop-up time is going to be. Would it be 5 days, 10 days, 5 months, 6 months, as the case may be? Now, my gut feeling is that quite a bit of oil spilled, because for the residents to get that fume in such a very heavy way to cause nausea, respiratory issues, which there were a lot of cases that were reported, then it has to be a sizable amount of oil that would have been spilled. A few of the hunters who really raised the matter a week ago, when they found it, they claimed that a lot of the oil was into the tributaries that were heading into the river as well. I do know, I saw some photos where Heritage put some pontoons in the river to capture whatever oil that was going into the river. Our big concern was that if the rain came down heavily and it moved a bit of that slush and oil, condensate actually, into the river, that could cause a serious problem by itself. So what had happened on the morning of the meeting, the villagers were able to express a lot of the concerns, matters were raised. And I can tell you since then, Heritage has put some things in place. So for instance, there is an ambulance facility with medics to be able to provide some support to the community, especially after hours in the night, if there are any issues around, any medical issues and so on. What I had also asked, I reached out to the ERHA and asked them to consider turning the Guayaguari Health Facility, we do have a health center down there, into a type of quasi A&E where we can have a doctor overnight, stationed in the facility until this matter is resolved in a couple of weeks to a month time. At least you can have some triage in the event you do have a child or an elderly person that has a serious medical concern by the time that happens. So they've dealt with that. I had asked Heritage that a report be sent to me and the village council in 2 particular areas, an air quality report from the IMA, EMA. I had asked that some report be done in terms of the condition of the river, in terms of the oil that went in. What's the impact? What's the current impact? What's the long-term effect and so on. So those were a few of the immediate issues in terms of that. We did talk about, the impact to the wildlife, the impact to the residents, just getting into where the spill is. They would have had to inconvenience some folks with their homes. There's a huge amount of dust. They have to cut some tracks. So all of that are issues that the village council have decided to form a little unit, like a single point of contact, that all the issues that the residents have in terms of issues around their property compensation and so on, those things can be channeled to a single point, and then that would be relayed to Heritage. Heritage is having some serious problem with the mopping up, because to get heavy equipment onto the site is a challenge because you're in the forest. They are having issues because they now have to cut roadway, cut tracks to get up there. Now, my understanding is that when you're building these pipelines, you ought to have a right of way. And clearly, whatever the right-of-way was many years ago when these lines were installed, the right-of-way was not kept. Trees and so on would have grown up on it. So that is one of their biggest challenge right now. I am getting daily reports from the Heritage Communications folks that all of us will be on the same page. They are right now, I think they've hired probably about 30 or 40 people from the area to work with the contractors in terms of clearing the site, getting to the oil spill site, and getting the contractor to start the mopping up operation. So in terms of work and so on, there is some work that is happening. I know 1 or 2 contractors have been awarded the work to get inside it and get the work done at the end of the day. So basically, I think Heritage woke up and I found that they were a little all over the place. I thought that coming out of the Paria incident, in terms of communicating with people, they would have been a little more straightforward and organized, and that wasn't the case. So I'm hoping this week, as we continue the conversation with Heritage, we would get a little more organized structure in terms of what's happening in the community there at this time. So that's basically the latest where we are with regards to this.
Well, MP, I'm glad you brought up Paria, because I was just in a small gathering to honor the victims about an hour ago. There was a small little function in South, right? A private function. But in terms of, you're hitting it on the head there, because to be extracting oil from the ground and so on, you have to have a proper preventative maintenance program, and clearly that would have apparently fall by the wayside somewhere, because to be clearing trucks now, trying to catch up to contain the spill, I mean, that's not best practice. You really should be as proactive as possible. So somebody would have dropped the ball in terms of not making sure or ensuring that those trails, that roadway has proper passage in it. Who knows what's the condition of the pipe? What would have actually caused the accident from taking place? So clearly the ball was dropped somewhere. And also, what is the EMA role? Has the EMA come in and done anything thus far?
I have not met anybody from the EMA. I am only going with what Heritage has told me, that the EMA was there. Some air quality exercises were done. I did speak to a couple of the residents this morning, and they did indicate over the last day or two, the stench and the smell has subsided considerably. So what was happening early on in the week in terms of when the wind blow in the morning, and then like around 6:30 in the evening as the heat rises, that stench has now subsided quite a bit. But they did let me know that the EMA was there. The air quality is well within the range for suitability for the community. But I haven't seen anything in writing. Nothing has come to me in writing. It's just what Heritage has said. The thing that I wanted to just raise on the last point you make, Sarfraz, is that Guayari, it's a 100-year-old oil industry, and we do have pipelines scattered all over the place. And my concern with Heritage as being the forerunner to Petrotrin and so on, what is in place to start looking at these lines on them? These lines are antiquated, they are old, they are not getting the type of attention that they would have gotten 10, 12 years ago. And I would hate to have another leak 6 months down the road in another community, right? Is vibration analysis being done? What is happening with not only the lines, but tank farms and so on in these places? Because if they are not looking at a rigid preventive maintenance type of program, that could put us in trouble. And when you look at the fact that when Heritage is posting, and I raised this in the public domain as well, when Heritage is posting nice billion-dollar profits at the end of the year, I'm asking how much of that is being spent on HS&E, right? In preventive maintenance, inspection of these lines. And at the end of the day, coming out of the Paria incident as well, which is something I think will be adjudicated at the end of the day, is that under the OSH Act, the owner of the premises, no matter if you have 25 contractors doing the work, the owner of the premises is ultimately liable at the end of the day. So Heritage cannot move themselves out of the way and say, well, it's a third-party contractor, or it's a third-party oil company, oil that is running into their catchers and so on. You are the owner of the infrastructure. You are the owner of the site. You have an ultimate responsibility. So in your best interest, you ought to be spending that money to make sure that all these preventative maintenance checks are being carried out, because the impact to the environment, flora and fauna, that's an issue. And I mean, when you look at the fines are $100,000, which is chicken feed. that is something that we have to address at the parliamentary level as well. How do you make owners of these oil operations more liable? Let it hit them in their pockets when because of their slackness, if that's the word you want to use, puts us in that type of problems.
MP, I must commend you on your proactive measures. Even Heritage themselves don't seem to be proactive, but just to switch conversation, 4 fishermen left Mayaro on Tuesday, January 31st, and they set sail on a 5-day fishing expedition. Something went wrong along the way, and the pirogue overturned off the coast of Cedros. Missing are the boat owner, Hiralal Kublal, Rishi Kemchan, Andy George, and the boat captain, only identified as Criminal George. On the 5th of February, it was reported that the boat has been found in Cedros area. However, these men are still missing. MP, you were coordinating with those involved in that search and rescue mission. Are you satisfied with what was done to find those fishermen, and how do you think we could prevent such accidents from happening in the future?
So let me make this really, really, really clear. I am extremely satisfied with the support that I got, that the family got from the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, from the Air Guard, the Hunter Search and Rescue Team, which is led by Captain Valance Rambarat, who was on spot from the first day. That coordinating team, I was kept in the loop every single day as to what was being done, what exercising. The local Coast Guard commander here in Galeota, who was not responsible for the activities in Cedros by the Coast Guard, but she acted as a liaison and she was providing information on a day-to-day basis. So in terms of the activity during the search and rescue component, I think it was well attended. Even the anti-kidnapping squad got involved, because I understand that they were trying to see if they'd have gotten TSTT and Digicel to ramp up their broadcast signals on the Western Peninsula there. So in the event they could have picked up a heartbeat from one of the phones, they may be able to locate where these guys were. So there was a very huge collective effort. Now, in terms of the update, we did find one of the body on an island off the coast of Venezuela. That's that's Rishi's body. There's a second body that was found off the coast of Moruga, which is they're still trying to identify through DNA analysis as to whether it belonged to one of the other 3 persons who are now missing. But from a foreign affairs perspective, again, I took the lead and reached out to Minister Brown, and I advised Minister Brown that, look, at the end of the day, this body is in Venezuela. It is 600 miles from Caracas. So it's not to say that the family can go to Venezuela and take a taxi and go down. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through your consulate in Caracas, has to be very proactive on this. And I must say again, the support from the ministry staff has been excellent as well, because of the intervention that we made very, very early. So like on a daily basis, I'm in contact with the consulate head right here in Trinidad. They are in contact with what's happening in Venezuela. And there is a policing unit called the CPIC, which is like their criminal investigation unit in Venezuela. They are coordinating with the family on a day-to-day basis. So the long and short of it is that the Coast Guard should be taking the family, 3 or 4 members of the family, tomorrow to Venezuela via diplomatic channels to receive the body and bring it back here to Trinidad. It has taken a little time because of the paperwork that is necessary. The CPIC on that side had to get pathologists. They had to make sure the body is cleansed, make sure there's no diseases that can be transferred across international borders and so on. And just the paperwork alone, and paperwork in Trinidad is a mess. I suspect it may be the same thing in Venezuela. So it did take a little time. So we're bringing back more than likely Rishi's body tomorrow. Hopefully by the end of tomorrow, his body is going to be in forensics. And I guess now the family will take it from there in terms of the burial. The other guy, I think there's been no DNA confirmation. And obviously both the other 2 is still missing at sea at this time. I think the Coast Guard, they outruled piracy because they found the engine, they found the boat, the nets and so on were found. If it was piracy, the likelihood of they stealing the engine and boat and nets and so on would have been high. But the fact that these things were found, I think they ruled out piracy. And I think they're really going with the fact that there was a very, very bad sea conditions on that Friday in the Soldado area. And perhaps the condition of the sea and the size of the boat and certain other things, the boat did topple over, and that is what would have, you know, caused the incident at the end of the day. So that's the latest with regards to what's happening with the fishermen on that side.
Well, MP, I have a question concerning that. Sorry, Shanta, you want to go first?
No, you go ahead, Sapras. I will come in
Right.
now.
So the question, MP, is that again, I am very happy that to hear that the Coast Guard and the Air Guard and so on were reacted. They communicating with you and they reacted in a timely manner. But I have the personal opinion that we always trying to play catch up, and we being reactive more than proactive. MP, do you think the time has come where, for example, the Ministry of Agriculture, who is in charge of fisheries, should mandate all boat owners to have this GPS, a GPS type device, and no boat will be allowed to go unless the GPS is properly functional and so on, make it mandatory. So in case there's an emergency, they can track the vessel via the GPS?
Okay, so there are two things here. Our Fisheries Act legislation is 100 years old. So it's 1919, 1918, somewhere around there. That is why we are in extreme difficulty for Coast Guard to board trawlers in terms of the illegal fishing, the fishing that happens on our waters. Our legislation doesn't give our authorities a lot of teeth because of the age of the legislation. Now, since 2020, when the Parliament convened, Senator Rambarat back then, he was heading the new fisheries bill, which was moved by the Prime Minister, the fisheries bill of 2000. Now, while it's dealing with fisheries and fisheries in general and updating all the international conventions, there is a part of the fisheries bill that deals with specifically what you are referring to, Shafraz, in terms of how do we deal with the operations of fishing at the very lowest level. Now, in a nutshell, without going into the exact legislation, basically, how the legislation is there is going to be an authority that is going to be placed on every port of dispatch. And there's a requirement for fishermen now. You will have to have a certain requirement, you have to have a certain age, you have to have certain equipment on your vessel, including live vests, including GPS, including flares, including radios and so on. So this inspector unit on the port, you will have to come with, like how a pilot gives a flight plan. You will have to come and log in your flight plan. I am captain, this man is the first mate, I have 3 men. They are all certified to be on the boat. This is our gear, I'm certifying we have all these gears and so on. And we will be heading to X location. We will be there for 72 hours. We'll be back on Wednesday evening. So that is our flight plan that is going to be logged in. Now, the person or the authority which we have asked at the Joint Select could be the use of municipal police or municipal policing unit hub at the location. When they sign off, when they go out at sea, the Coast Guard now has the monitoring and management responsibility. So they can stop the vessel and say, look, where is your authorization? Who is you? Are you here? Where's your flight plan? They can now check and see if you said you had the radio, you had your flares, and if you don't have it, they could fine you, they could lock you up, they could turn you back and send you back to port. So in a way, the legislation is trying to force fishermen or force the fishing industry to work in a simple. Now, it's more complex and complicated than I have said it, but I try to break it down in the simplest way that I can. But to answer your question, yes, if we don't get that legislation going, but my challenge is that it's 900 pages. And I feel because of the fact that we are losing fishermen, we are losing lives every year, we ought to pull out that piece from that big bill and bring it as a separate bill and let it come to Parliament and deal with it urgently. Because remember, laws are designed to protect you from yourself. That's the first thing. You know, I asked a couple of fishermen the other day, I met at the family's home. I said, look, when you board a fishing vessel to leave the port, don't you ask yourself one basic question when I go outside there, what happens if I lost communication, if I lost an engine, if something happens, how do I get in contact or how do I call for help? And if you don't take these things into consideration before you leave the port, well, then you're asking for trouble. You know, so how do we force people to act? And you know, I always say that unfortunately we treat fishing as a hustle, not a business. And unless we can get our players in the fishing industry, especially guys with the one boat and so on, to understand that, you know, it is business, it is lives we have to protect at the end of the day, then we will continue losing fishermen, we'll continue having men lost at sea, and we will continue having to, you know, put all these massive search and rescue operations in place. All we could have done is make sure you have a little radio, have something in your place. Now, before I just move from that point, coming out of this event, I reached out to the US Coast Guard through the embassy. And I had a conversation with the US Coast Guard in terms of, you know, what can we put in place as a low-cost option that we can provide some sort of service to fishermen, especially on the East Coast here. It can be, you know, used anywhere else in the country. And we've been working on a design of a type of radio system which will be low cost, that where a fisherman mounting this with a very small solar panel on their vessel, that they can have SOS buttons, they can triangulate a signal for the Coast Guard for any vessel in the area that you are in trouble. And it doesn't have to mean that the fisherman has to have GPS and understand how to tag a GPS and so on. So we've been looking at that. I've been working with a gentleman out of the TT Coast Guard here. So we've been having those discussions. And the question was, how do you fund it? I have reached out to the IDB as well. The IDB has a funding mechanism for specialist projects like these. So through the IDB, I've written them. I told them about the challenges that we're having here in Mayaro in the fishing industry. And there is a possible solution. Would you be willing to look at grant funding to see if we can find a solution for these things? Now, nothing is casted in stone. My function as the MP is really to knit these things together, is to push for it. And we will continue discussing these matters with the various authorities to see, can we build a platform that our fishermen can have some safety? We can have some service to have them be able to get assistance whenever they get in problems outside there. So that's in progress at this moment.
You know, my brain is ticking already. We will get Gary Aboud on this program, along with you, MP Parry, and have a discussion about how we can improve the fishing industry. Because I absolutely love that statement you made. We see fishing as a hustle and not as a business. But the potential for it to be a very profitable business is there, and also the need, right? Before we continue with the discussion, I just want to make one announcement. I'm seeing that there are persons on the Facebook chat inquiring whether or not Mr. Christopher Budram will join us tonight. Unfortunately, we did have to postpone that episode with Christopher Budram and Dr. Ali. We will have it later on, but it could not happen today. So I do apologize. We did put out a notice. So I'm sorry for those who may have missed the notice, right? But we were very fortunate to have MP Parry join us tonight to share some very, very valuable information. So those of you who are on, please stay locked on. Okay, thank you for that. So guys, continue.
All right, MP, based on your answer for that last question, I would assume that you do need government work for them, because I mean, you're very proactive and you're actually linking with the US Coast Guard, you're linking with the IDB, you're linking with the local businessmen to see how best you can be as proactive to help all the fishermen as possible. Kudos to you, MP.
And so, that is what you do. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, we sit on the opposition benches. At the end of the day, we have very little say in national policy, in national development, right? I mean, I get both every day for little things in the community that I have no control over, right? Because I can't tell the government, hey, do this and do that and do that. But there are areas where I can have influence. And you see issues like these, where you have the influence as a member of parliament, you can reach out to an embassy, you can reach out to an ambassador. And they are all and very willing to assist, because they have the technology, they have the science, they have the experience. The US Southern Command is one of the most experienced quasi-military operations that's sitting here in Trinidad. There is nothing stopping any member of parliament from reaching out to that branch of the US Embassy to deal with issues like flooding, landslip, and so on, for engineering expertise and so on. So I use the tools that's available to me, and I've been making some headway on it. And I've been using that for the last 6 years, by the way, so it's nothing new in terms of the outreach that I've made. We've been using these things over the years, and I'll continue using those doors to push them open.
Well, MP,
okay, I see, Safras, I see Brian, who is the former chairman of SCIC with us, and he has his hand up. So maybe we could give him the opportunity to make a contribution.
Yeah.
Brian?
Hi. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Brian.
Good night. Good night.
And it's always a pleasure to hear MP Parry. I have always said that MP Parry is one of our MPs who is always on the ball with a lot of things. And I want to say, MP, with this situation, even with those fishermen and what has happened on the coast, what role has, if there's any, I didn't hear, the Institute of Marine Affairs, if they were able to assist. The reason why I asked that, when I was chairman of SIDC, when we had to assist with fishermen and we wanted to get involved, we were always told that we could not go and deal with fishermen directly because IMA has to play a part and fisheries division have to play a part. And it really shows sometimes that the bureaucracies and it kind of keeps away proper form of helping the people who are really the stakeholders, who are the fishermen. And I want to commend you for what you've been doing. I can tell you in your constituency, when we were in government, I can tell you that 20 persons we assisted as young fishermen, especially with the tilapia industry and even with the seafood industry. And sadly, in 2017, when the SIDC was rounded up, all those fishermen, all their work that they worked hard for was end up coming to nothing. Many of them talked to me. So, MP, was there any, just to come back to the original question, did the IMA in any way try to assist you all or even fisheries division?
No, as far as I'm aware, the only persons that we were interacting with throughout the entire episode, outside of the state agencies of the Coast Guard, Air Guard, AKS, later on we got the Venezuela National Guard involved, but we got a lot of help from private fishermen with private vessels. I know Mr. Aboud from FFOS, they did do a lot of assistance in terms of the search in the Soldado area as well. But as far as I'm aware, there was no interaction between myself and IMA, EMA, and even the Hunters Group as well. None of our discussion did those agencies come up in any of the activities during the search and rescue.
Now, just to close off my point is, sadly, yes, the fact that the Air Guard, the Coast Guard, they come in under the national security apparatuses, that they are the ones who will come in as what you call the first responders. Yeah. But sadly, the Institute of Marine Affairs, while as chairman of SIDC, I had to tell them is that even the fisheries division, that your role should also be to help our fishermen in whatever way that they can get any of assistance, why for even on the seas. And all they told me was, is that, Chairman, I'm speaking out of my jurisdiction. So basically they were telling me, hush your mouth and stay in Malaysia. But it is unfortunate that these type of bureaucratic styles is what suffers our fishermen. And again, MP, you do a great job as well. And with the expertise I've had, anytime, feel free to even call upon me. Great job as always, and keep it up.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
So MP, what I'd like to state is that if it is that you are successful in getting the assistance for the radar system and the GPS and so on to the Mayaro fishermen, I think it will be a very good template to expand to the other fishermen across the country also. As Lisha said, we'll have another program dealing with fishing as a topic by itself, and we could probably explore that there. MP, the other question that in our minds right now, and this is something that really hit me very closely, is that rushed job, the Manzanilla access road. A lot of hullabaloo, a lot of publicity. They were able to open it the day before school started. But when somebody did a video footage, the thing looked real porous by MP, and there was a school that told that once rainfall there, that is they're going to damage. What exactly, we have been getting reports that it actually has started to deteriorate already. What exactly is the condition of the Manzanilla to Mayaro road through the coconuts?
So if we're talking about the bypass road itself, which is about 3 kilometers in total in about 3 pieces, I would tell you this, it's about 60% deteriorated right now.
Wow.
There are huge sections that, I mean, it will rackle your car apart. Because the top surface has gone because of the weather and the use, and because remember, there's no limitation for weight and so on, so the trucks and so on are using it. Now, when the road had originally been built, now the issue around whether we got value for money for $14 million, that could be up
Where
in
is
the air,
this road?
right? You know, so there is some issues around whether we paid too much money for that. When the road was originally put in place, I had queried basically two questions with the Highways Division and Pure. One, why wasn't the road resurfaced with asphalt? And two, if it's not being resurfaced with asphalt, why aren't we using the bitumen to hold the top surface together? So the response was, the Prime Minister has instructed the Highways Division and the Ministry of Works to build a new 10-kilometer road from the beach resort, the Manzanilla Beach Resort, which is in North Manzanilla, straight to the Long Bridge, which is called the Mitan Bridge.
That's
In
a
their
valid
view,
response from the
in their
Prime
view,
Minister.
if they were to, they didn't feel it necessary to put another $4 or $5 million in asphalt, taking into consideration that by September, because the mandate is that the road should be built and completed by September, before that October-November rainy season kicks in full force. So that was one of the consideration why not to put an asphalt coating, a 2 or 3 inch
So you afford
asphalt
to build the
coating
road.
over the road. The second issue concerning why they didn't use the bitumen as an enabler to hold the top rubble is the word. I'm not sure is the word they use for the top of the road. And again, the conversation was that because of the sensitive nature of the swamp, they did not want to introduce a huge amount of this petroleum-based oil. If the rain comes down and that petroleum-based ends up into the ecosystem in the nervous swamp, we may end up in some problem. Now, I am telling you how they sold it to me. I am telling you just how they explained to me, and what the concern was that the ecosystem inside the nervous swamp is critical to maintain a wind shear balance. If we lose water, we lose flora, we lose fauna, and it could upset a lot of things. So taking into consideration that this thing is a short-term road, they felt at this time they would not use the asphalt top and they would not use bitumen. And my argument to them was that means every 2 weeks you have to surface back this thing. Every 2 weeks now you have to come and dump surface material and roll it, because I can tell you it is horrible. It has some sections, there are potholes, like if you were passing through Plumita and Beach again, the ripple effect shaking your vehicle. So I mean, we're glad that it's there. It takes 15 minutes to get through, but oh man, it is in a horrible state. The last conversation I had on Thursday before Carnival, when I reached out to Pure told me that they have started to do some resurfacing, and they will continue doing some resurfacing over the next 2 to 3 weeks in small pieces. I passed there yesterday. There was only one area that I felt a bit of resurfacing had happened, but the vast majority of the area, it's still in a really horrible condition in terms of you know, that ride to go through it. It's really bad. It shakes your vehicle clearly too much. So they need to do something about it. So that's the status of the road, Shafraz.
MP, and I just want to say that is totally unacceptable. You just spent $14 million on an emergency access roadway. Yes, we connected the communities. Yes, kudos and so on. But the quality of the workmanship, to me, my personal opinion, the taxpayers got a ruddy again, and now we're playing catch up again. We're being reactive rather than proactive, and this seems to be the modus operandi in our society now, which is, to me, it doesn't make sense. We're going to spend more taxpayers' money to fix a problem that they tried to fix before, or in justification is that we're getting a brand new roadway in September. I mean, but come on, what will happen between now and September? We have a rainy, dry season. They're expecting. That is nonsense.
And it's a little, even a bit worse than that, because I came through the other night after Parliament, and there are some areas where there's no lights. I had asked that, listen, the entire roadway ought to be marked off with reflectors, because look, again, I mean, we can't control people. You know, we have to protect them from themselves. You know, as I said, law is made to protect people from themselves. And there are some areas where the edges of the roads are already collapsed, where trucks trying to pass what will happen in the night where there's no reflectors, there's no reflector net? We are a society where fellas go down the road, take to drink, and they end up, at the side of it, they end up topple over in the water course and they drown. Now, we will say people must have responsibility for themselves and all the other nice things. While that is so, as a state, as a responsible state, a responsible government, the state ought to put all the mechanisms in place to protect you. And if people breaking the law, listen, you deal with it at the end of the day. So there's so much areas that I've written to Pure, I've written to the Highways Division. Because as fast as I go through these things, I write them. Look, right now I have a question before the Parliament for the Minister. The Minister made a commitment that all the engineering designs would have been completed by February, and the tender for the new road would have gone out by the 1st of March, and the work to start by the middle of March. So I have a question asking him, what is the status? Did the engineering designs complete? Will it go out to tender? Because at the end of the day, we need the road. We cannot afford to have a disconnectivity between Sandy Grande and Mayaro. As I say, 80% of our tourist business comes from North Trinidad. 80%. And North Trinidad, they're not going to come through San Fernando to come to Mayaro. We lose that connectivity from North Trinidad. It impacts our tourism, our restaurant business, our hotel business. That impact is too much for Mayaro to handle. So, I mean, we have to push to get this roadway completed at the end of the day.
MP, now just shifting focus, you made a bold statement that the Regulated Industries Commission is chasing away business.
Yes.
I'll be very brief. Can you explain what do you mean by this?
So the RSC has been mandated to manage the requests of TNTech for a rate increase in this country. So let's just pull it back a little bit, right? Is there a requirement for TNTech to get a rate increase? I think so. I do believe as a service organization, they've maintained, I still feel TNTech is the best service provider we have in this country in terms of service. Do they need the type of increase that they are asking for? I have a problem with that. Now, the RIC was mandated to take all the data from TNTech in terms of its justification, do some analysis, go out to John Public, get a feel of what the country is saying, and then go back to TNTech and say, well, look, this is the situation. But when you attend those meetings, you get the feeling that this is a done deal, that the rate increases, it's a done deal. And what you have is the RIC defending TNTech. I have a problem with that. So let's talk about the rate increases itself from a business perspective. I know during the consultation, a lot of issues about the impact to the man on the street, the small man, the small homeowner. That's fine. It's going to, it's going to be a heavy burden. So for the smallest homeowner, you may end up paying $100, $150 more per month on your bill, $200 per month on your bill. Now, for many of us, $200 may not sound like a lot of money. But for people who are on fixed incomes with children to go to school, with mortgage and installment, $200 is a week of food, right? So it is a high impact. So that's just one. But let's talk specifically on the business sector. Coming out of COVID, you have a lot of small businesses did not come back up on stream. According to one of those business associations, the regional confederation of small businesses, they estimated over 6,000.
The Confederation of Regional Business Chambers.
Right. That was it. They had put out some data there that almost 6,000 small businesses were affected. Now the state, and up to today, the state has put no mechanisms in place to find those businesses. How do we bring them back up on stream to put back another 20,000 people back to work who would have tagged on to those SMEs? So that's by the way. But what would happen, the few small businesses that are going to remain, when you look at, for commercial accounts, you're looking at between 50 and 75% increase in terms of your electricity bill. For what you call commercial D1 and D2 or industrial customers, you will go as far as 150% increase. So for instance, a supermarket, like one of those large supermarkets. If you are accustomed paying $150,000 or $200,000 per cycle for your electricity, your bill will land somewhere around $600,000 a cycle. Now you're talking about $300,000 more by 6. That is $1.8 million a year alone in electricity. You think that any business is going to absorb that cost on their own? No, it's going to be passed on to the consumer. And I like to use the example of a chubby. When SM Jalil has to make that chubby, the factory that is making the chubby, their power bill is going to go up. When the chubby is made and it goes to their warehouse to sit down, the power in that warehouse is going to go up, the cost. And then when he sells it to a distributor like Passad's, the Food King, and that sits in Passad's warehouse, his electricity bill is going to go up. And when he moves it from his warehouse to the supermarket shelf, his electricity bill is going to go up in the supermarket. So when you put all of those pieces together, what is the price you're going to pay for a chubby? And what is even more alarming, the RIC had the gall to tell this country that the CSO provided them no data to look at the social impact of this rate increase. Now, if that is not madness to the highest degree, right? That is something that is worrying. And as far as I understand as well, the closed door meetings with the business associations.
I am not hearing MP Parry.
Hello?
Yes,
Right.
I'm hearing you now.
Yeah.
There was a
Yeah.
momentary loss of audio.
Okay, yeah. The manufacturers and the business associations were very aggressive against the RIC, and they even threatened, a lot of the manufacturers even threatened that if this 150 or 160% increase is executed, it may well worth their while to pack up their shop and go to Guyana. And that's a problem. Now, while when you look at the rates and so on in other countries, they are much more high. Remember, we are not only dealing with increased electricity rates here in Trinidad, we are dealing with a slowdown of business, issues with foreign exchange, the ease of doing business, a whole collapse of government systems. So these guys may say, but why are you gonna take that headache? Have to pay more for power to make more product, but better go Guyana, better go to one of those other islands at the end of the day. Even the Supermarkets Association consensus, well, look, why are you going to drop 75% increase? Let's do it over 4 years, over 5 years. So you can have a gradual increase while the state put mechanism in place to drive solar, drive wind, get more efficiencies, get companies to start, changing out their old AC units to the 410 and 420 direct inverter units that are going to use less power and so on, rather than just come tomorrow morning and drop a 75 or 80% increase in your electrical charges for businesses. So this is why my position is that, we may end up in a place where the RIC is actually going to chase businesses away from this country if they don't take a different approach to how they're dealing with the electricity rates going forward.
Safras, before you come in, right? After Safras asks his question or makes his comment, I just want to say we are on to the Q&A and the open mic session. So if anyone has any questions, please put it in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to ask it yourself or make a contribution. Safras, continue.
Sure. MP, very good analysis. Again, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head, and everything you're saying is facts, and this is FACTS, not FAX, as the Prime Minister will spell it. Anyway, I would like to ask you something. This will also affect business in a negative manner. What exactly is the status of crime in Mayaro and Rio Claro? We saw some recent news where bandits got killed while trying to rob a KFC delivery guy, and we also saw any news where residents were brutally their homes were invaded and so on by some bandits, not from the area but from outside. Is it that bandits from other areas coming into Mayaro and Rio Claro now, looking at the tourists and so on as soft targets?
So we've been seeing a rise in serious crimes. It's not a whole lot of them, but when you look at what's happening, it's very serious in terms of the police having to shoot these guys on 2 occasions. We have seen some increases in some areas in terms of burglary, robberies. The perennial larceny is killing us. Perennial larceny is really killing off farmers right now in Rio Claro. As you find the TTPS is putting more pressure in northern and central and southern Trinidad, these guys are coming into rural communities and are looking for soft targets. They are looking for soft targets and they are finding some soft targets. Now, when Commissioner Jacob was here, I invited him to the constituency. We had a long meeting in terms of some of the things that I would like to see. Now, I am always cautious at the end of the day. As MP, I have no instructional powers over the police, but I can advise them of what the constituents are saying. And our biggest challenges here in Mayaro is the lack of vehicles, lack of transport. I've had incidents where our task force had to flag down a taxi to go on a crime scene.
Wow.
And these fellas full with machine gun and Uzi had to flag down a taxi to go on a crime scene to respond to a crime scene.
Wow.
Sometimes Mayaro is such a large constituency. You can't have one vehicle in Mayaro. You need vehicles for guard and process. You need for court process. You need. So vehicles is one. I have raised issues of traffic wardens, because when we have to use police to manage traffic, there's less police to do their jobs on the outside. So we've talked about traffic wardens. We still have a shortage in terms of municipal police. I have queried whether, you know, officers are well tooled in terms of their bulletproof vests, all these kind of things. And then you have another issue where you have manpower issues. Sometimes I would reach out in the night to an inspector in the area and say, look, I have a complaint from some residents about noise. Some neighbor come and making a set of noise. Well, they will reach out to the MP 10 o'clock in the night. As a courtesy, I'll try and get to the inspector and they'll say, Parry, 2 man turn up to work. Right? On a shift at 12, 2 turn up. What can he do at that point in time? So there are so many things in the TTPS that needs re-engineering from a central level that has to come out in Tamara. But I must also tell you as well that Eastern Division, when you look at the statistics, when they share their crime data with me, because I would reach out regularly to them, you see where Eastern Division still does a reasonably good job in terms of policing. And there's a reason for that. A lot of the police officers in Eastern Division live in the communities, and that helps quite a bit. The fact that when you have policemen living in the community, you tend to get a better interest in terms of the work, in terms of the attendance and so on. So all in all, it's a balancing act, but you know, I have reached out to, I mean, I see Donnie has made a comment about Pradelle Lassany. I mean, I am on the phone with the minister, sometimes twice for the week, minister. You know, we can't have a Pradelle Lassany unit sitting somewhere in Claxton Bay or San Fernando to service Mayaro. You know, it is difficult to do that. You know, why can't we have units specifically engaged in our constituency here? And do you know there is legislation, I understand, where you can make some of the farmers themselves inspectors, SRPs, who can do a lot of the monitoring and act as expert witness in a court matter when you charge somebody. So you have some of the farmers being involved in the policing of the sector as well. So you deal with the manpower issue. You empower some farmers to be more as watchmen with authority. So they're not going to be given firearms to go patrol, but they now become experts. They could tell one type of dashing from the other and so on, or one type of cattle, you know, from the other. So they become expert witness. I don't know why are we not using that bit of legislation. And if you look what they do in the US and Montana and so on, they found the Cattle Herders Association, they formed their own policing unit to police themselves, police other farmers and so on. So we have to get creative with Pradelle Lassany in terms of how do we police the sector, because it is really a huge disincentive for farmers, especially now where we're trying to drive agriculture to move it from under 1% to probably about 4% in terms of GDP. That should be the target for us going into 2025. If we don't get to that point, we'll continue this $6 billion import bill, which we don't have the money to continue doing.
Okay, I would like to, we are live on YouTube, and I just want to say welcome to the YouTube audience. This is a fairly large audience there. I also want to acknowledge a few people who have joined us on Facebook. Senator Damian Lyda, thank you for joining us. And also I'm seeing Alderman Angie Benjamin, and we have a special message for you, MP Parry. Good night, a special good night to my favorite opposition MP. And by the way, this is not someone who supports the opposition. So kudos to you there. Brian, I see your hand up, right? But I just want to take a couple of questions from the audience. We have a question from Kazraj. what's the situation with the issue of coastal erosion along the Mayaro-Guaya coastline? MP Parry would have questioned Minister Sinanan in 2019.
So there are three areas where you have massive coastal erosion. The Guaya-Guayare Bay area, where we've had some collapse of some houses. There is some structural integrity issues for homes that are probably within quarter mile of the coastline as well in that Guaya-Guayare area. So let me deal with that first. The coastal erosion unit in 2016 came down. We did an analysis. They brought in all their specialists. I think some budget was done. They got some money. And last year, I think just sometime during COVID, I understand the work has started. It has stalled now. I'm not sure why it has stalled. But the idea here really is to put some engineering stuff on the bay there to stop the erosion. Now, I had an alternative for them. I said, you know, rather we're going to spend $500 million to stop the erosion. What if we were to look, there's about 25 or 30 homes that are at risk right now. Let us find some state land close by. Let nature happen. If these houses have to collapse into the ocean and so on, let it collapse. Let us compensate the homeowners. Let's build a new community for them, right? And the same money that you would have compensated them for the homes, we build a new community for those 20 or 25 homeowners, and we can develop, a new community along the way, rather than having, and it may cost us less than $500 million at the end of the day, rather than putting some engineering solution to stop the cliff and the hill from collapsing. One of the challenges is that compensation to homeowners is a challenge, because there is a lot of different arguments as to why the erosion happened. Some people blame the Galeota Point facility, the jetty facility that was built, the changing of the oceanic currents and so on. But those things you go to court. If you have to go to court for those things, it will take you years. You have to get engineering studies and so on. So how do we find a middle ground for that? No question, nothing was answered. So in terms of Guaya-Guayare Bay, that is what's happening. In terms of North Cocos, which is where you have on the North Manzanilla side from the tourist resort, you would see from the Meetan Bridge, they've started a piece coming back down with what you call the boardwalk or the concrete boardwalk, as the case may be. And I know they've started some stuff. So that's the South Cocos Bay, the piece that comes from the bridge back to Mayaro. And then on the north side, they've started a piece. Now, again, when I meet with the coastal erosion unit people, I would ask this simple little question. Okay, we're going to put money to build these features, right? When you build these broadwalks and nice things, people will come. And when people come, they will socialize, they want to cook. We are putting a toilet, we are putting a bin, we are putting nothing, because people will socialize there. Say, what if we spend a little more money and let's build some tourism facilities? So when people come, they walk on the boardwalk, we put up some lights, we put some bins, we put a stage, they could have some singing, some dances, something, just like how the New Jersey boardwalk is when you go to New Jersey. So you create a destination for tourism business and you hide the coastal implementation inside it. So we kill two birds with one stone, and we're spending money in the right way as well. But again, all I can do is talk and give suggestions. It's up to them when they sit and they go back to cabinet to decide how to do it. So there has been some work so far in terms of answering the question in terms of the coastal erosion. My view is not enough is being done, and obviously these are high price tag items. I haven't heard any other projects that are coming on stream to deal with the coastal erosion on the eastern side of the island as yet, outside of those three parts.
Okay, maybe Brian, I'm looking at the time, it's now 8:57. So Brian, I don't know if you want to come in now.
Yeah, I'll make it very brief. MP, you raised the issue of the RIC. I had the pleasure of being at the first two consultations. And MP is quite correct that the RIC was more speaking for TNTech. The RIC, when we asked questions as to what data they used, and believe it or not, MP, they went with the year of 2015. And the period of time that they used, when we checked our figures, that time period, cost of living was not high, and unemployment was not high. In fact, you had persons who were making a better living. But now, when we told them, look at the period now, where you have cost of living high, there's unemployment. We are coming out of a period of a pandemic. And they didn't even look at that because they were not prepared for these consultations. Finally, with the point of the consultations, RIC was not even prepared to even understand what are their own roles and functions. Because as a practicing lawyer, I had to ask if they knew what Section 6 of the RIC Act was, which showed that they had the power to review these services before you even talk about the issue of increases. They did not even know that. Even MP Padarat showed them even under the legislation, they had powers to review TNT books and they didn't even know that. So you're quite correct, MP, that they went into closed door because they realized that they were caught with their pants down, and if they look to do this, you're correct again. Business organizations will now have to be faced with higher electricity rates, and then it's a domino effect wherein that we, the citizenry, will pay for it. And you use the correct use of a chubby. The chubby, which is what, $1.50 apparently, I think. I'm hoping to be correct. That can be last bad chubby, right? It may go to $2 or $2.25. So you're quite correct, MP. It's going to kill a lot of businesses, and I agree with you. They may even go as south of Guyana, or they even go up further up abroad. And I have to say that we must always say that the United National Congress, the opposition, is the political party that ensured that they had consultations in the first place. Yes. And I must commend the UNC again. The party has always been there for the people of this country. Well done again, MP. You hit the point straight on there. I won't go into anything further. I know time is pressing.
Just to add one more thing to that, right? The other argument here with the RIC and TNTech is that there is the feeling that the citizenry is being penalized for TNTech's bad management, for the state's bad management of the resources as well, right? I think only today, on today's newspaper, I think one of those energy companies let the cat out of the bag in terms of the rate they pay for natural gas at $4.40 per MMBTU, which is madness, right? And if that is across the board, it then means that the best salesman in the world, Dr. Rowley, he really made a mess out of this thing. You know, we are now being penalized for TNTech's bad man. I always ask, when you have a monopoly, right? Now tell me there are two providers for power and let the market conditions decide the price. And if I have to pay 140% increase, that's fine, that's the market price. But you don't tell me you have a monopoly, one provider, and then you have the power to decide what is the price that we must pay. I think that is very insensitive, and especially there is no conversation around how do we make a gradual increase? And I mean, everybody knows that there's no right time for a price increase in anything. There's no right time to say, well, you're waiting for a right time. But I think the business sector is rational. They are based on rational people. We understand there are certain things that the state has to provide, but it cannot be a rash option. It cannot be. So my question, when I start paying 140% increase, I could get a TNTech connection in 2 weeks. I can tell you I wait up to 1 year for 1 meter in my business place, 1 year to get a second connection. 1 year. And it may not have necessarily been TNTech's fault, but the process to get the inspectorate and get an inspector to get up here. And every time he comes, he finds 55 other problems, right? And when you have to go back and forth, the bureaucracy is, this is why the ease of doing business is killing businesses. So when you lump all of these issues, plus you're going to put this icing on the cake of this operation of TNTech and your utility costs, then that is really going to sour the milk. And businesses going to look at their options. And there's another hidden dragon that is coming. Our European Union blacklisting will have a big impact on the insurance industry, right? You have some reinsurance are talking now that, listen, if Trinidad remains on that blacklist, we may have to move operation from Trinidad and carry it up the islands. Now, when you have all these companies and businesses looking at other places to operate, what is going to end up with us here? I mean, people are not seeing that. I mean, we are busy with our day-to-day lives at times in terms of just the struggle to survive. But there are so many dark things that are hanging over this country that most people are not aware of. Look, Prime Minister talk about all our bank accounts that are closed down in Brussels. What that means is that if your child is studying in England very soon, you may not be able to send money for them. That is the issue. And Prime Minister shrugs that off. You understand? So all of these things, when you put it together and you look at the impact it's going to have on our business climate, our business environment, our confidence, and business is about confidence, both international and local. Sunday and today's newspaper, I think our liquidity is about $8 billion in the commercial banks. Now, $8 billion sitting in the commercial banks at 1.5% does nothing for us. We need to put that into the circulatory system, and there's $20 billion in money power outside there. But if the state and the business confidence is not there to make a private sector investor take out that money and do something, then we're in for some problem. So it's really a Pandora's box that we're in. And if we don't get this thing straight and get it right and start pushing for some right decisions, we're going to continue going down into this black hole, and it will be difficult to get out of it. No matter who you put in government in 2025, it is going to be extremely difficult to get out of it if we don't mash the brakes from now. And clearly this government seems incapable and incompetent of mashing that brakes. And that is where we are with that.
I am seeing Damian with his hand up. I'm assuming it's Senator Leida.
Good evening. Good evening.
Hi,
good evening, team. Excellent program this evening, and I'd like to commend MP Parry for a very thorough contribution and a very detailed contribution on the situation that the country is facing from a macro and micro economic standpoint. And I only jumped in here because when I hear the matter of trade, manufacturing, investment, it gets me a bit excited to jump in and contribute, because I think MP Parry, gave a very comprehensive account on what will scare investors away, especially when it comes to the increase in electricity or an increased rates in electricity. But I want to also add to what MP Parry is saying, is that outside of just foreign direct investment, which he will agree, and we know that we've lost over $10 billion in foreign direct investment from the time that the People's National Movement came into power, and that continues to go. But even when we looked at the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, with their commitment to try to double export, which is a very important thing for us, to double export by 2025, this potential increase of what it was 140% in electricity will once again add to Trinidad and Tobago becoming less and less competitive on the international market. Because you see, we have certain advantages and disadvantages. For the years gone by, we've had the advantage of a great education in this country. So we have experts at the helm. We had a relatively inexpensive energy cost, and labor cost, as we see, has been going up and up over the years. So once you drive up the cost of manufacturing, so let's talk about manufacturing here. Once you drive up the cost of manufacturing, we'll become less and less competitive on the international market. And as a result of that, instead of going for doubling our exports, we'll actually start decreasing our exports coming out of Trinidad. Now, let's look at what is happening in Trinidad. The cost of manufacturing in Trinidad is skyrocketing right now. Why is that? Well, various things that has happened under this government. One in particular has been the increase in fuel prices. Now, regardless if you're just a manufacturer and you're not distributing in the country, still workers have to get to the factory. People have to drive their cars to the factory. They are going to demand more salaries, higher salaries now, to compensate for this increase in fuel that has been increased, I think, more than double. Diesel is more than doubled. Gasoline has gone up, I think, 5 or 6 times now. So this is going to translate itself into employees asking for higher wages. That accompanied with, of course, the things that we cannot control. So we couldn't control the high freight rates internationally. We couldn't control the cost of commodities coming in from outside. But we could have controlled things such as taxation at the port. We could have used a lower freight rate, as Guyana did, so that imported products would come in and there'll be some buffer, at least from the very stark increases of 30, 40, 50, sometimes 100% increase in food prices. Now, when you have that, employees are going to require higher salaries just to be able to live and survive. That's going to translate itself into increased cost to manufacturers. And along with all the other things that MP Parry have discussed, which adds costs, which is especially when you think about the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago, the torture one has to face at the port as a manufacturer, importing your products, having that added cost of having to pay demurrage and rent when you have a port that is running inefficient, when you have difficulties in accessing US dollars, so that you know that, and I said this once in a budget debate, we have a country, a nation, where the majority of our businessmen have broken the law. Because as we all know, it is against the law to purchase US dollars on the black market. But I put it to you, if any businessman could come and say he never purchased black market US, I say he lie. And I put it to you that as a result of that, this government has literally forced people with their backs against the wall to break the law in this country. And when you have to pay $7.25 or $7.50 for US dollars, that again is impacted into the price or the cost of your production as a manufacturer. When we know only a small percentage and a chosen few are getting access from Exim Bank, but many hundred other small manufacturers struggling to get US dollars. And I could go on, and I don't want to take away from MP Parry's show this evening, but I could go on. But I could go on and on about the added cost that manufacturers, distributors, supermarkets, as I heard MP Parry speak about, the added cost, which is inevitably being passed on to the end consumer. And in the case I'm speaking about, is being passed on to the international market or the distributors that our local companies have, that they sell their products to get foreign. And let me tell you how important this is. When a government has shut down our biggest foreign exchange earner in Petrotrin, and we don't have to go into the history of why and how, and the fact that it is a former PNM government that put Petrotrin in that position. But the fact is, when they shut that down, no thought process was put into place as to where would the US dollar, where would be that gap of US dollar, where will we be getting that from? Now we have to turn as a country and depend upon manufacturers in this country to increase their exports so we can have more foreign exchange coming into this country. That's one way. Tourism is another way, but we know they've flopped at that. But specifically about manufacturing, we are solely depending on manufacturing, on the increase on manufacturing to bring US dollars in. And the government comes gloating in the last budget debate about manufacturing increase. And it did increase. But I wanted to state for the record, it did not increase because of any initiative, any position, any policy that the government ruled out. But it was on the backs of our innovative private sector, who risked and put their money forward. Fellas like MP Parry, who I know in his private life is a businessman as well as myself. And we put our hard-earned money on the line and risked to increase our business, to diversify our offerings, both locally and outside. We did that without the help of the government. We had to maneuver in so many different ways. And as a result, we saw an increase in manufacturing. Right? Despite
I think we may have lost Senator Leida there.
He was on the right track, which is good.
I know it was a very, very powerful contribution. I'm seeing Mr. Wayne Jutton with his hand up. Mr. Jutton?
Yes, are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you clearly.
Yeah, I see you didn't talk much.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
You didn't talk very much about
I just want to, sorry?
I think we're having a bit of a communication delay. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Jutman, because I'm not getting Senator Leida clearly.
Yeah, you didn't talk much about the divers, the accident on the Habitat job. I was involved in a similar Habitat job accident. Also taught commercial.
Yeah, are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
Yes, well, we actually gave Mr. Jutman a chance to speak because we weren't getting you. Would you like to continue?
Well, I will just close because I think I spoke a lot. I took a lot of your time,
Okay.
right? But I will just close by saying that by the RIC realizing they have to go into these closed room meetings with the business community now, they realize that the business community has probably got through to the heads in the PNM and forced them into these closed door meetings. Because at the end of the day, once the business community saw 140% increase, everybody realized how that would impact their businesses. And I put it to you that if that should happen, we'll become even more and more uncompetitive on the international market. Our export sales will decline inevitably, and we will see more, I mean, it'll spiral out of control, as I think MP Parry so clearly articulated for us. It is a downhill spiral. It is a snowball effect. So I just want to say thank you very much for letting me in for a few words. Congratulations to a brilliant program tonight. Well done to MP Parry, who I think is an excellent member of Parliament for Mearo. For what I've been hearing tonight, he's definitely on top of his game. So well done, guys.
Senator Leida, thank you for that very powerful, passionate contribution. And you know, you're always welcome here. You always have a space here on Critical Conversations. So, Mr. Jutman, over to you.
Yes, I am a diver for many years. I actually taught commercial diving, and I set up the recompression chamber in Tobago. I was involved in a similar accident on a habitat that these divers went through, but we didn't talk much about that tonight. But this light increase, Minister Parry spoke about, you could probably do with a little increase. I live in an extended room, 2 of my sons live with me, but our bill is $1,800 when it comes. And we all freelancing, and work is not every time. So you add 60% or whatever that is going to be murder, all right? Now, over the years, I have broke down out to sea many times. Been held up by the Guardian National. A radio and GPS would really be helpful, but everything that fisherman is cost. And on your North Coast, even with radios, I spent 14 years in marine affairs also too. Because of the mountains, you have many dead spots that you're not going to be picking on. Okay. Pirates out at sea. Few times pirates hit from Blanchisseuse to Las Cuevas to Maracas Bay in one night. About 10 engines were stolen. This happens more than once. And fishermen still have the loans to pay. The bank doesn't have any mercy. And this happens quite a few times. All right. Let me see what else. In 2019, I attended a property tax meeting in St. John Road. And they were talking about back taxes, though this didn't come out in the media. They were talking about back taxes from 2016 to the present time. And a property that was paying $100 and something a year, you're talking now thousands of dollars per year. So not just increased fuel, but you're talking about back taxes to the tune of thousands of dollars for the small man is going to break us. Okay. Just a question to Minister Parry. Did our refinery produce diesel and gasoline? And if our refinery produced diesel and gasoline, this is the first time in my life, if we budget $50 a barrel for oil, if it increased beyond 50, we jump for joy. This is the first time we're paying a serious price. And I'm questioning that we no longer produce our own diesel and gasoline. And how is that, affecting us? I just want to go back to the divers now quickly, though that's not the issue tonight. Apparently, we're not talking about that. But I went to the same diving school as Gregory Wilson on the board. Right? And excellent school. But I see these divers not qualified. They're just scuba divers. But what I want to tell them is this. This diving school that we went to, world's first underwater hot tap, world's deepest dive, only school with ROVs at the time, world's largest diving company, Oceanair, very good school. But what Gregory has never told them is this, except for the dive medic, the scuba instructors, the NDT men, those instructors had no diplomas on the wall. What they had was 15 years on the North Sea, 10 years on the Gulf of Mexico, and they were excellent. They could tell you if you're stripping a hard at what size spring knot, they could treat a diver. The thing is, if I'm in trouble in the water, a diploma is not going to help me. Scuba is just one form of equipment. But if a diver has thousands of hours working in the dark, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., a diploma, I mean, I'm not ruling out a diving school will teach you about treatment tables. Feasible, but it's not really feasible. You cannot, there's no shortcut to experience. There's just no shortcut. You know, and a diving job many times is 24 hours a day. It's 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning, you know, and experience. When you come out of diving school, you have a diploma, but you'll be nothing more than a tender. They're just going to tell you hold a hose, you know, and that's my, well, we're not getting into divers tonight. That's my short contribution. You take care. Right.
Mr. Jutton, I want to thank you for your contribution. And I see this is exactly what we want from the program. And we want ordinary citizens to come and express their concerns, you know. And I just want to say, I hear you about the property tax. I hear you about the increased electricity and water rates. I hear you about the concerns of the divers. MP Parry, I know you were going to respond.
Yeah, let me just three areas that Mr. Jutta wrote that I want to just respond to. The issue concerning, you know, the fishermen and insurances, that is something that if new fisheries bill is taken into consideration in terms of right now fishermen and farmers, they can't get insurance, especially fishermen. There's no way to insure your engines and your nets and so on. That is something being aggressively looked by the Joint Select Committee in terms of how do we find a way of bringing them into the insurance network to deal with some of those things, especially for crop loss and so on. With reference to the property tax and the back taxes, I can tell you that taxes prior to 2019, I think the last time it came to Parliament, that there would have been waived, the legislation that would have been passed to waive taxes prior to 2019. I have not seen anything going forward. So as it stands today, if the property tax were to be implemented next month, I think we would be outstanding for 2021 in terms of those 2 years, unless they come to Parliament and we waive for 20 and 21. I think my last recollection, the last bill in the last sitting of the last Parliament, we would have dealt, I think the Minister of Finance did bring a waiver to prior to 2019. With reference to Petrotrin and the issue around the diesel and the oil, there's a common fallacy that the government pushes, and again, the layman on the street wouldn't understand what went on there. They claim that Petrotrin was not making money, right? I can tell you for the last 2 years before they shut down Petrotrin contributed between $1 and $2 billion to the coffers of the Treasury. Now remember, a loss is an accounting position in a book, in a ledger, right? So that's one thing. It's a loss after you pay taxes. So the company was paying money to the Treasury. The second thing about it, we were making money in US dollars, but we were writing off debts in TT dollars. Now that's an accounting strategy, right? That's an accounting strategy that could have allowed us to still earn the US dollars, but you could have written off your loss in TT dollars. Now, why would you write off loss in Petrotrin? Well, we write off loss in PTSC, in WASA, and every other state enterprise for the last 25 years. And none of those state enterprises was bringing US dollars. None. Petrotrin was bringing US dollars. We could have managed, let me tell you, none of the expert analysis, none of the cabinet reports gave the cabinet advice to shut Petrotrin down. It was about restructuring and resizing. We could have brought Petrotrin back down to an 800 or 900 person operation, work with our partners in the region to get the additional oil beyond 60,000 barrels. We need about 140,000 barrels of oil to operate the refinery. Right now we're doing about 60,000. We would have need probably another 80,000 barrels of oil. We could have used a bit of diplomacy not this kind of nonsense that Young and Rowley want to walk in the people place and talk to them how they want. You have Suriname as an oil producer, you have Guyana as an oil producer, they don't have a refinery. They may not want our refinery, but we could have get them to bring some of their oil to raise our capacity, put 800 people back to work, bring 3 fence line communities back in operation in terms of Marabella, Pointe-a-Pitre, and all these places. So it's not always about the money, it's about how do you use your partnership, your diplomacy, how do you go to your regional partners and use diplomacy, not gunman tactics, like what these fellas want to operate on, and work towards regional development. And I know as a fact, Guyana would support us. You know, we have been a partner to Guyana for the last 50, 60 years. We've stood with Guyana in some of their toughest times. So I am saying a bit of diplomacy, the right foreign experts, diplomatic experts. You said, let me tell you, not a prime minister and a minister of government should never go to negotiate with nobody. You send your experts first. When the prime minister term is to sign an agreement. No prime minister don't negotiate nothing in life. You send experts. So what Stuart Young wants to do now in Venezuela with Dragon is what he should have done 1 year ago. Now he's deciding he wants to send experts and technocrats and diplomats to deal with Miss Delcy Rodriguez, who is the VP in Venezuela. But Miss Rodriguez is a foreign service diplomat with 40 years experience. She served at the United Nations. She serves at the EU. You think Stuart Young and Rowley could go negotiate with she? They can't. They're out of their league. So listen, nothing is irreparable in this country. Nothing is unfixable. There's a solution to all of our problems. It needs effective and inspirational leadership. And sadly, Dr. Rowley doesn't provide either at this point in time. Sadly.
Okay, guys, I'm seeing it's 9:25, so I think it's a good time for us to wrap up. There is one question that I think is a great question for us to wrap up this program with. Mayaro has recently been a shining example of success. What is your formula for getting a powerful PNM Mayaro to participate in the development of that district?
Well, I understand where the question is coming from, and I don't think I've been doing anything different to what the person is asking. Now, I have a style. And a style that I've been using for the last 6 years in terms of how the politics is in Mayaro as a marginal constituency. When I won the election, Lisha, I became the MP for everybody. Not only the 10,000 people in the UNC who voted for me, the 6,000, 7,000 who voted for Senator Rambarat last time around, and the 7,000 who voted for Mr. Mahabir Singh this time around, they are all my constituents who I will serve. I do not pick and choose who to work with. I will work with any group, whether you're PNM, UNC, XYZ. I don't think there is any operator in the PNM in this constituency or any supporter of the PNM in this constituency who could come and say Parry has not lifted a hand to help, who have listened, who have engaged in a constructive conversation, because at the end of the day, I keep telling people, when the tide rises, it's not rising for UNC alone. It rises for everybody. But the problem that we're having, is that at the national level, there is some issues of how do you spend money in Mayaro. And this is what I told me. I asked for about 5 more CPEP gangs to get more work done in Mayaro, to keep our verges clean, to help with the schools, cut grass on the school grounds and so on. And you know what the conversation was? They said, Parry, they're sending nobody in Mayaro because they can't win Mayaro. No, that cannot be a rationale. Because it's not Parry House you're coming by to cut the grass. It's school children, it's preschools, it's around government buildings, to the benefit of the constituents. But when you have people in the political organization takes that position, that when you help Parry, you strengthen him and the UNC. But I mean, I can't help that kind of nonsense conversation. But what I can tell you, I will continue to reach out to all parties, to all persons, whether regardless of what your political affiliation is, and we work together and we will get things done. And listen, at the end of the day, that is not what the electorate wants in 2025. Well, brother man, well, there's a time to vote. And if you want me, I can go and stay, I can run my business and stay quiet. I give nobody no trouble. But until then, for the next 2 years, I am the MP. I have a style, I have a delivery, a method that I use that has been working, and I ain't changing that for nobody. I move execs, and we leave that right at the close of the line.
And MP Parry, that's why people who are not UNC are on the chat saying you're the favorite opposition MP.
Well, and there's a reason for that. I work with everybody, you know?
Very good, very good. So, okay, guys, it is 9:29. You know, we usually do a very hard stop at 9:30. Shanta, so over to you for some closing remarks.
MP, I have to come Mayaro. I have to change residence because I think I was waiting for top fan for MP Parry tonight. But I must say, MP, I must commend you as a son of Mayaro, your commitment, your being proactive, your dedication towards the people of Mayaro. I must commend tonight on that. And again, we thank you for being here tonight on Critical Conversations. And we look forward to having you again in the future. Thank you so much.
Savras?
Yeah, MP, you know what, there's so much of things that we needed to talk about. That time run out on us, but definitely whenever you could come, we have the Sargassum, I think is an unexplored issue. Really and truly, if we could get the Sargassum out of the sand and out of the water and utilize via research and development, get some good usage for that Sargassum. I mean, we'll be clearing the beaches, helping tourism, and also making a good byproduct. And that is something to think about. We also have the whole tourism aspect. I think Mayaro is untapped. We have so much of potential, Mayaro, as a tourism product. We also have the port, that line unutilized, and that port, as last year indicated, that port is an untapped potential for Guyana, and we could be winning revenue there, you know. I see Donnie saying Sargassum. Talking about Donnie is actually one of our very active farmers in the dairy industry. And you know what? The buffalo industry was killed, and Mayaro, Manzanilla was a home for the buffalo. So that's something we can look at for future discussions also. MP, the sky's the limit. I just want to thank you for being very proactive. You are a proactive guy. You raise the issues. You're trying to help out. You're reaching in areas that is not within your remit, but you're still doing it because you have the constituents' best interest at heart, be it the fishermen, be it the residents, etc. Thank you for doing such an effective job, MP, and we look forward to seeing you again.
My pleasure to be here. I'll be happy to come back and talk on any other matter. I mean, as I say, I'm not an expert in a lot of things, but I have a fair idea of what can be done. And I'm not afraid to reach out to people and ask questions because I'm not sure. I will ask a question and rationalize it. And whichever direction you can go in, getting people together to talk about these matters, we'll find a way forward. And in closing, I want to thank Lisha and the team at Compass for allowing me to be here for the hour and a half. The engagement was good. I enjoyed the conversation, and just invite me any other time you're ready. I will make myself available. So thanks again.
You know, we're picking up on that offer, you know, because this to me was such an excellent program and very educational, very informative, very visionary. I want to thank you so much. I know it was short notice, but you accepted. You know, and I also want to thank the others who would have come on and made a powerful contribution as well. Senator Damian Lyda, Attorney Brian Begg. I saw we had Councillor David Lau in the audience. We had Alderman Angie Benjamin. Everyone who was on YouTube. We were actually streamed on YouTube today, Facebook, those who joined us on Zoom. Thank you all very much for your participation and your interest in the program. And of course, next week Sunday, we will be back. I think Kevin Rabnarine is joining us next week to talk about the economy. So guys, on that note, stay safe, have a good night, and we will see you all again next week Sunday at 8 p.m.